The next, again, recorded presentation, this one is by Ajit from Meta. He couldn't be here because unfortunately his visa was not granted in time. And he'll be telling us about the role of perceptual imaging and the impact to display design. So yeah, I think.
Hello, my name is Ajit Ninan, and I'm sorry I couldn't be with you today. I work at Meta as a perceptual architect, working on perceptual architectures for display. And today my talk is about exactly that, the role of perceptual imaging in AR and MR. As you can see, the trend for displays are to get smaller and smaller. We started with a cinema 20-foot screen and it was far away from us. And as these displays get smaller, they start to get closer and closer to us, and they get lower power, and they get so much more efficient that now we can actually put them on your face. For VR, we have an occluding display, and for AR, we have a transparent display. But you can clearly see that these displays are going to be very different than the ones that we've had in the past. The way the real world works is much different than a display. And the real world reflects rays of light from the object, and you get two different images to each eye. On a display, a TV, for example, you get the same image to both eyes. So the opportunity is great for us to be able to replicate what happens in the real world when we have two displays on each eye, and we can respond to the way the head moves in recreating the different rays that come to the eye and the different images that you would see. The display industry has been innovating on 4 axes for the last few years. Basically, it's been focused on resolution, dynamic range, color gamut, and frame rate. This begs the question, what makes a good image? In order for us to quantify what a good image is, we must understand what preference is. So preference in the case of dynamic range was easier. We quantified it into 3 areas: black level, peak brightness, and average luminance. And we were able to measure what people prefer in terms of luminances for the peak brightness, what people prefer in terms of the black levels. And we were able to categorize that and create a label for HDR. So TVs have had the advantage of being around for 80 plus years and 50 years of standards. And so this has been well quantified and well measured. However, when it comes to near eye displays, this is not the same. It's a new display category, and we have to add more axes that we have to consider. So for example, we go from 4 to 9, and the new axes are field of view, stereo presentation, latency of the presentation, degrees of freedom, and accommodation invergence. The interesting thing about this is these interact with each other. So when you look at each one of these categories, they imply different things. For example, for stereo, there's vertical disparity to be taken care of, accurate depth. Frame rate implies persistence, judder, and flicker. And if you take any one of these implications, they interact with each other to tell you whether you're doing a good job. For example, with word locking, you have to consider accurate depth and persistence in order to have a good word locking experience. These further interact with each other, for example, frame rate and resolution, which I'll talk about in a bit, but all of them start to interact with each other to the point that is very hard to track, and this is why your brain looks the way it is. For example, your brain is what sees the image. It's not just a function of your retina. So your retina plus your cortex is what creates the human visual system. If you look at this image at the green blinking dot, you will see that the yellow dots appear and disappear from your vision. Not that it really is appearing and disappearing on the image, but it's happening in your brain. This tells us that what's happening in the brain is what makes us perceive an image and perceive image quality. Given that your brain is a multisensory device, you can imagine a lot could go wrong if you do one of these things wrong. For example, if you mess up on the image quality, we could result in things that look like this for our consumers, which is what we want to avoid. So when it comes to the 9, we have to take into consideration image comfort. And image comfort, there are very few standards, and we do need to establish that as an industry. So this is what can make people sick, and so we have to find what a minimum viable product would require. For example, if you are in a VR 360 video and you have high frame rate and you have low latency, we would have a good experience. But as you start to reduce that frame rate, you start to get in the territory where the